Gonna play.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It is a special community call. It is April 23rd, 2024. I'm going to date this. Most people date us by maybe the length of our hair, glasses on, glasses off, what color are the glasses? But it's a real pleasure. I'm Jennifer Britton. I'm the CEO and founder of Potentials Realized, which opened its virtual doors more than 20 years ago now. It's hard to believe that it's been a 20-year journey. And I have the pleasure of sitting down today with Ivana Ballet, who is going to interview me on, this 20-year journey and maybe some of the highlights. So I'm gonna pass it over to Ivana. And Ivana, what would you like to say in context setting as we get going on today's call?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And I think I want to just really celebrate, and honor you and your contribution to every person who has said yes to your programs. But bigger than that, we know you to be, the maven of group coaching, having written the first book. Help me with years because and it's the first book, and I think that in and of itself stands alone.
Yeah.
But beyond that, go ahead. Yeah,
I was
go
just going
for
to
it.
say, and as you're speaking, I'm realizing the end of this year. So that book came out in December of 2009. The end of this year will be 15 years
Yeah,
since that book came out. Really, I want to say changing the landscape of how coaches even approach
yeah,
coaching, which is a whole theme that we'll probably touch on today. So I just want to say hi
absolutely.
as more people join us for this special
Yeah.
celebration call today. So
So thank you, Gina, for joining. And so I just want to, as I was saying, I just want to celebrate you because there's a lot behind your brand, you, but also like a lot of beyond what we see in your programs, whether it's me leading them, there's always momentum and activity. And you touch so many people in so many different ways. And I just think it's important that we take a moment to pause, to honor, and to really be with you and really acknowledge the contribution you've made through this organization, but to the industry and to the world. Like as the Potentials Realized brand is that ripple effect. And so let's dabble with the ripples and see what wants to be explored and see where the conversation goes. So I'm really excited that everyone who's here is here. And for those who are watching on demand, thank you for taking the time to watch this and to join me in celebrating Jennifer, celebrating 20 years of Potentials Realized, but also celebrating each and every one of ourselves for the contribution we make in choosing to bring this profession forward. So I say, let's lean in, let's explore, and let's learn from one another. So with that
love
said,
it. And what a great way to start the call, Ivana. Like you always embody sort of the philosophy and principles and the origin of this organization at Potentials
mm,
Realized. Because when I sat down, I don't think a lot of people know this story, but how the ripple effect and all of this came
yeah.
to be. I was in a coach training program myself. I was a leader with the UN at the time. I had flown up to Canada to take part in, one of 5 coactive coaching training programs. I hadn't lived in this country for 15 years. People might find that that's like really so different than today, but I sat down in one of those coach trainings and our job, the coaching exercise was to like think about your future self and think about what your
Uh-huh.
vision was for 20 years down the road. And so actually I sat down with a wonderful coach from the Toronto area, Lillian DeVries, who sometimes pops up on my LinkedIn page.
Mm,
And she remembered doing this exercise with me 20 years ago, where I sort of birthed this notion of like the ripple effect. Because I hope that as I get older and look back at my entire life, not just the last
yeah.
20 years of coaching, but the 15 years before that working globally, my work, my impact really will have been the ripple effect. To me, it's about affecting change much bigger than myself. I'm one person. And while I bring strengths, it's about activating others. And so all of you are testament to this. I see lots of faces around the table and more people coming in. And I know even from like how these calls work, we have now dozens of people watching these replays. And so when I sat down in probably 2020, no, sorry, it would have been 2002, not 20. It was probably 2002 when I started my training, saying, I've had a big impact in the world as a leader, but I think in bringing coaching to the world, I want it to be more than me and create a ripple effect. And that's where we are. And all of you are group coaches, team coaches, coaches of many, that whole little micro trademark of coaching many evolved in 2013 when my second book came out, after the editor and publisher saying, we want another grand slam hit like you had, Jennifer, with effective group coaching. Can you do a book two? And I said, I'm not going to do just a book two on group coaching. We got to talk about teams too. So that was the roots of From One to Many, which now is celebrating 11 years in print. So I'm appreciative because I
Beautiful.
couldn't do this work without people like you, all of you around the room and all of you in the world taking practices, that we know work into the world with your clients and modifying them. So that's the
Hmm.
ripple effect.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm going to, because true to the group coaching experience, even though it's you and me alone with this beautiful group of people with us, I want to co-create this conversation with you. So where do we want to take the conversation? Do we want to go back to the origins? Do we want to start now? And how do we want to navigate this?
Well, I think we need to evoke our audience, right? We've got people here live, and I want to invite you because many of you have been through one or more of our courses. You've heard the origin. What are you curious about? Like, I think Ivana will have curiosities because she's
Hmm.
known me for a few years, working as, part of the team, but she was also an alumni at one point.
Yeah. Through
So,
the pandemic,
yeah,
through the pandemic.
during the
Yeah.
pandemic, which was a whole other interesting ride where, that allowed me to really give voice to how I saw this business originally. It wasn't just about being a business around training coaches around group and team coaching. There's a three-legged stool. Once again, the triad, but it's a three-legged stool. So we work with coaches, we work with leaders and teams for business success. And along the way, I picked up sort of a fourth leg of the stool, which is entrepreneurs. Because where did I learn to be a great group coach? It was working with entrepreneurs way back
Mm,
in 2005, 2006 with government funded programs, with post-secondary education institutions of entrepreneurial students. Yeah. So I don't know. Is anyone,
beautiful.
let's see if anything's come in. Nothing's come in with the chat. So you get to decide, where do we go next,
So
Ivana?
I'm gonna support our people who are in our room. So if you do have a question, I invite you to raise the hand or put it in the chat and we'll keep our eye on it. And in the meantime, we'll just keep going. How's that sound, Jen?
Sounds easy. Which, as
Okay,
many people
good.
know, complexity is in the group. So when it's easy, just keep on rolling, keep on
Exactly.
flowing.
So let's go back. Let's go back because it's amazing to be where we are, but it is a journey, and you've been on a journey in the 20 years, as we call it, Potentials Realized. But as you said, you had 15 years with the UN. And so let's just be with and what I would love to know is like, what inspired you? Like, what inspired you? You talked about that CTI training, and that's maybe where it started. But really, what inspired you? And what were your initial goals or vision? Because often we do group coaching around vision. What was your vision for
Mhm.
this company?
Well, I just knew I wanted to continue adventures. Why I was even thinking about leaving my role at the UN, coaching came into my life while I was starting this what became a 3-year engagement managing a sub-regional team across the Caribbean. And
Mm,
I stumbled into a session delivered by a coach. I'd love to know, I will never know what their name was, but they were doing a session on work-life balance in 2000. And I was intrigued. I was like, whoa, I teach work life and I have no work life, because honestly, I was seeing my team across these 10 countries. I'd head out to the airport on a Monday morning with 2 briefcases in hand, and I'd spend the day in 2 or 3 countries. No joke. That was my life for many years. But this woman's session had such an imprint on me because for the first time
mm,
I was able to like stop and think, what is work-life balance to me as a leader? And so I tucked it away. I flew back to my duty station. I continued these years of traveling, and sadly woke up one morning in 2002, 3 with an eye infection. I think most people know that I still have vision loss in one eye because of scar tissue that was left from this infection that I think got out of hand because I was so worn down. And so
Mm.
in even starting this business, there was part of, I didn't want to sit at a desk for the rest of my life supporting people from behind a desk. I wanted to step into the shoes of what I had started doing before the eye happened, which was like doing inner consulting work, like really getting to do these special projects all over the world of how do we help teams thrive. So that was truly the seeds of this. And I saw an opportunity, even in my bad eyesight, I saw this opportunity that coaching could be a vehicle that could impact change through the phone in those days. It was really all phone, and it was all one-on-one. And I kept putting my little hand up in these rooms saying, I love this, but I'm going back to my duty station, i.e. my life in Barbados, and I'm speaking to a whole government. I'm working with the government. Like I want to take this coaching stuff back to the government and say, hey, what's your vision? Like, where do you want to go? And I kept hearing all these people in the coaching industry at the time saying, you can't do that. We
Mm.
work one-on-one with people. And I said, but there's got to be a way that you can blend what I'm learning here with groups and teams. Oh no, that's training. And I said, but I am a trainer. I've been a trainer for 20 years. And what I'm learning in this room is not training. And so that, in my own renegade, usually against the grain, not the usual way, the
Yeah.
seeds were planted. And I really thought, as I opened the doors metaphorically here, almost only 15 minutes down the road from where I now lived, I registered this business on April 7th, 2004. My mom and dad were in the car. My husband was with me, shivering because it was his first April in Canada. And I walked into this government office and I said, I want to start my business. Like, they're like, oh, you've got to plan it. And I'm like, oh, I've been planning this for a few years now. And I signed up. It took $60 and about 5 minutes.
Mm.
The irony is, a few weeks ago, it still cost $60, but it took me 3 days to renew my business license for a fifth time. So technology is better, but sometimes the processes aren't. And as I said, Potentials Realized, really it was helping people around the world. The vision was continuing to still help people around the world think about where they wanted to go and helping them realize their potential. So my mom and I had sort of gone back and forth on this name between, I was flying a lot of time between the Caribbean and Europe for about 6 months, which is why I was so run down. And every flight I'd sort of like get to Europe and I'd want to call my parents because I knew that they were worried that I was doing all this transatlantic flying. And it was after 9/11, sadly. And it was, I would phone her up from wherever I was in the world saying, hey, guess what? I've sort of thought about the name again. And she'd be like, are you still going with Potentials Realized? And I'm like, I think I will.
Mm.
And so here we are 20 years later. And although my mom is, her memory is really not that great. She has dementia. She still recalls that trip. And I just was on the phone with them a few hours ago, which is nice. So yeah. So that is part of the journey, like it. And I think to me, it's how do you stay true while creating a business that grows with the world as the world changes.
Yeah. And it's actually what I love about what you just said is it's not only about creating a business that, for you, that's actually your bigger possibility for all of us through the work that you do, through all the different doorways or pathways that you have created. I do agree. You're an absolute renegade. It's one of the reasons why I came to work with you, because the inspiration, the momentum, the innovation that you offer, just the energy you bring with that. So with that said, let's look at some of these, let's look at the 20 years and we can't go year by year, but what would you say to be some of your greatest
Mm.
achievements that you really want to kind of acknowledge and celebrate?
Well, I think there's yes, group and team coaching, which I have been a pioneer in that area, but I think there are other areas
Mm,
that I'm even more proud of that maybe haven't been as supported because they were so ahead of the times. Like I like to always say 2016 actually, when I took effective virtual conversations to the publishing world, and they were like, oh, we don't do virtual. We just don't think there's an opportunity for virtual. And here we were 3 years later with the pandemic happening and seeing that whole body of work
mm,
just 10xing, 100xing. I got off the phone a few minutes ago with someone who said, I want to take virtual facilitation essentials. Why don't you offer it that often? And I said, because I took several thousand people through this training in 2020, 2021, where the
yeah,
world
me.
was needing support and community. And, our vehicle is and continues to be the virtual space. So I'm really proud of that work. And, what has sort of come full circle, and it's just here at my desk, of course, because I use my stuff and I create my stuff because I know my people love the stuff, is the whole conversation sparker, right? So every product, there's some new things that come up. These are the charms, which are an experiential tool to help people really get anchored and get into the dialogue around things. And so this year we celebrated 10 years of the Conversation Sparker cards, which still sell. And those were they are a deck of visual cards. But the charms to me are an important representation of where we are in the world right now. When we go into rooms, physically or virtually, with teams or groups, they're hungry for conversation. A lot of them are excited to play if they're allowed to play. And that brings
Mm,
me back to sort of what I saw in the world of rooms and retreats years ago. Like, do they even have permission to play? Because how do we learn? Do we learn through the most serious things? Not necessarily. So the Conversation Sparker whole line of products, which now are 3 different photo decks. One came out in 2014, the original deck. And these were in response to actually some travel that I was doing with teams. And I had to go to West Africa a while ago. And my whole luggage allowance was actually visual cards by another company. So I wind up in Africa for 10 days, to work with a team from 25 countries. And I could not bring anything except my visual cards. But I knew that to work with this group from 25 different countries across West and Central Africa, it was critical that I had these visual cards. And that really was the impetus for creating postcard sized briefcase easy card decks. And so the latest iteration is the charms. I love the charms. And I had an order from a coach training company last month for 65 sets of the charms. They actually are gifting their coaches the charms as a graduation present, which I think, wow, for me, that is ripple effect. That is, how do I creatively, look and listen to what my clients needs, the groups and teams that I continue to work with, see what activates them, but then also put it in a process or a product that other coaches can benefit from. And I do feel that this is really has the potential to be a runaway hit of service to everyone. Last week I was in a little community nearby here, about an hour and a half away. Easy driving to get there. And I first spoke with a group of HR professionals, had the charms, they liked it. But then after that, a team leader had hunted me down through LinkedIn and said, I hear that you are coming to our community. Guess what? We have a team day at the same hotel. Would you consider coming to work with our
mm,
team after you speak to this group? I said, absolutely. So I got a couple of hours with this team, and charms, what unlocks conversation? Something different is what's going to help teams. And it was a really fun afternoon. It was days like that as I'm driving home going, wow, like really amazing, just amazing. So Stephanie's
mm.
asking, can Jen explain a little bit how she uses the charms with
An
different groups?
in-person session.
In-person session. So it's pretty easy. Like I have my little like Canadian flag. It's a maple leaf here. Just bring a bowl, bring a whatever, and have everyone pick a charm. So I had them do the charm on what is your takeaway, right? So someone might choose the arrow. I've gotten really clear on where I'm going. Maybe someone else picks up the Tinkerbell, the fairy dust. My takeaway is I need to splash a little bit of Tinker dust or Tinkerbell dust on what I have to do to evoke some magic. The anchor is actually one of my quarterly themes. I want to be anchoring my own work a little bit more in, not surprising, the physical space. Because next week I move north, which has also been part of my journey. So a lot of my work has been informed by our Canadian North, and some would argue the Central Ontario Canadian North. But I started out as a group worker with young people and corporate leaders in one of our provincial parks. I was 16, 17 years old, and I would take people on these wilderness canoe trips. And so next Monday, I get to move up towards, I'll be 45 minutes from the park. And, it's just a magical place where a lot of people love to come and be in nature and just be with nature. And I think to Steph's question, like, you can take anything. You could have the charms. You could have people just look around the context in which you are standing to find something that's going to represent perhaps the structure of your conversation, right? In coaching, we talk a lot about the value of having a structure to remind us on a regular basis of what we are committed to or what is important to us. So we can not only use metaphors like the charms, like a visual metaphor, but we can use natural objects to help evoke insight and act as a reminder for whatever commitment we create for ourselves. So, Steph, is that useful? Getting you to think about what you might do? And you could do this one-on-one, you could use it with a group, or you could even use it with a team. It's a great question.
I've just ordered mine and I'm excited. I'm going to bring Cheryl's voice in just a moment, but I'm just going to share my idea. I actually just had the idea, Jen, that when I get mine, because mine are coming to Italy, is I'm actually going to use them as a daily selection for myself to kind of anchor a theme for myself and my intention for the day. Because I know that would be something, so there's so many different ways that they can be used, whether they be individually with clients, even we offer them on a digital screen. So there's many different ways. So
And I will say more is coming, because to Steph's question, one of the next products, when I went to order some stuff to send to Ivana, actually just yesterday, there are some new products that I think will be related to this, because you could use the charms and say a wheel of life, right? You could actually randomly sort of throw the charms and see what shows up in different parts of the wheel of life. If you're on our YouTube channel, which is Effective Group Coach, once I'm not that consistent about recording it, but I do pull 3 charms a week for myself to sort of say, what's my intention this week and what might I be looking for? So there are things like the gecko, right? Or the chameleon, which to me, I think a lot of our work as coaches is about expanding that range for ourselves so that we can be a better chameleon as partner to the people we work with, which might be an interesting segue to Cheryl's question. So do you want to read Cheryl's question?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Cheryl, for asking it. So Cheryl asks, as a leader, I'm curious about how you have integrated your leadership experience into your individual, group, and team coaching.
It's a great question, Cheryl. I think we need like 3 hours on this one. It's interesting. I think, our identity is always our identity. And there's a huge part of me that has always been an innovative leader. I've always been looking ahead. I've always not fit into the traditional role, and sometimes, received quote unquote punishment for not being like an older man and doing the work, especially when I was a young woman as a leader in South America in a very machismo environment. And I think that has given me the confidence, right? Like, so how do I integrate who I am and who I have been and who I continue to be into individual, group, and team coaching? And a lot of my work with groups and teams is in the leadership space, even if it is, how do we as all employees, all human beings in an organization lead? I do bring that sort of somewhat controversial philosophy to the work that I do as a coach, as a program designer. I do believe that really to affect world change, we have to activate everyone. It's not just me as leader. And that was my real lesson learned in all the years that I was on the front lines of response to the wonderful highs and lows of the world. You to really affect world change, which means influencing future generations, it's about humility. And if a leader has an ego, we're not going to affect change. We have to enroll and enlist everyone. And so I think that's what I do every day, right? Like as coaches of a group, it's not about us. It's about us creating the trust and safety so that people can bring their best self to the conversation. And even in these conversations last week, I think I was so apparent of that theme of like, how are we really helping people connect and feel trusting with and of each other, even across immense differences. My whole career for 3+ decades has always been about working across differences, whether it was cultural difference, gender difference, whatever difference. However, I think in today's world of 2024, it's even more important to become a bridge and a conversation sparker, right? Not just starter, but sparking the conversations that need to be had. Because as I look back today at work that I did in 1992, 1994, 1998, projects that I was involved in leading, which were not just my projects, ultimately, they became everyone's projects, really have changed the trajectory of communities, of regions, of people who have led in the global sphere. And I'm just a human being. I'm like everyone else. But, the work that we do is magical in bringing people to the table, in helping them envision what is possible, and in giving them the space to think about what's the cost if I do or do not do this, and what is possible, and what do I need to do in order to make this happen. So that's all at the heart of what we do as coaches. Where are you now and where do you want to go? And what are you committed to no matter what? So I think I've been very fortunate. I'm a leader. I'm a mom. I think I sort of paused at that because when my son was born almost 19 years ago, it was hard as a young mom starting this business and being a good mom. And, I think I can look back and say I did a great job. He's an amazing human being. And I think being a parent, a great parent, is harder than being a leader at times, right? You're sometimes left alone to just look after and care for and shape your
Mm.
children, until you tap into community. And I think, I've been very lucky. I span a lot of amazing communities, whether they're here in Canada. A lot of people, I moved from north of Toronto to even further north of Toronto. And people have just started hearing that I'm moving again next week. And they're like, but wait, we're not going to see you in the morning. Like, you show up every day at the gym.
Mm.
I don't look like a person who shows up at the gym every day, but it's my grounding time. And so it's community is part of what we do, as well. So we've got Rosalind, and then we're probably going to have
Yeah.
to wrap in a few minutes. So thank you for these great questions.
No, let me just read Rosalind's comment and then we'll move forward to Kirk's. So Rosalind, Dr. Rosalind says, as a doctoral student, I found your leadership, adult learning, and group coaching very impactful in the way I began to understand as a coach how to work with groups and teams as a leadership coach. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rosalind.
Thank you, Dr. Rosalind. And that means a lot. Again, if you had met me maybe 25 years ago, I sat on the fence for about a year. Was I going to go on and do a PhD? I'm a lifelong learner. And it was at about the time that online learning was just starting to emerge. It was about 1996, 97. And I was like, do I go and do a PhD from South America? I was living and working out of Georgetown, Guyana. And in those days, the internet, like, it was really slow. It was really, I could spend some nights like an hour getting online from my little home after I left the office. And I wound up doing a post-grad certificate rather than a full doctoral program. But I went on and did more in HR because I was a leader and I had to lead teams. I had to recruit and train and hire these teams. And we had no HR department. But Adult learning has been my passion since I was 16 and I first started as a swimming instructor, right? That led to my work in the youth leadership sphere where I totally just took every opportunity to learn. I was trained in what we used to call project adventure, which was like adventure-based learning. So how do you take people to the wilderness and create these amazing learning experiences, which then, it helped me out when I lived in the north edge of the Amazon for like 4 years. I slept in a hammock. My hammock was my bed for 6 months of my life. Like I will look back at whatever time I leave this earth and say, wow, I've had some amazing adventures.
Mm.
And it's this ongoing learning because again, pre-internet, right? And in environments where you might be on 10 hours of blackout in a day, what do? You read, right? I read every book I could get whenever I got to a conference. I'd come back with my luggage allowance being these books, which just only about a year ago, I sort of like downsized and found new homes for. So all good.
So may I bring Kirk's comment and question?
Yes.
Okay. So considering your extensive work with the UN and your coaching vision, do you see an opportunity for you to work again with the UN leaders to forge more global dialogue and collaboration?
Oh, Kirk, what a great question. I used to always say to affect change, you can affect change from within the system, which I did for many years. You can affect change from without the system. And I think as I continue to face watershed moments in my life as well, um, I think there will be a next phase. And what I do, I'd made a commitment to my son when he was young. I found myself in Haiti when my son was 9 months old and got off the plane. And because I was there to do some support to the UN as a coach, this is my second year of business. I did some work around supervisory skills training. And, but they gave me my helmet and my blue helmet and my bulletproof vest. And that was a real wake-up call for me. This was 19 years ago where I was like, wow, I'm now a mom. I have a responsibility. It's no longer me, Jen, with whatever hat I wear. It was like, I'm a mom. I promised myself and promised my family that I wanted to be around when my son went off to university. And he did last fall. I, am now in my almost mid 50s. I think I'm not quite as good as I was. My eye has not changed, right? Like the big change in my career was I could no longer serve on the front lines of change and disaster. That was my expertise. I would put my teams at risk with the way my vision was 20 years ago, let alone now. And so I think, there is still a dream in me that with all of the things, and I have a feeling that as the world continues to change and morph, there are skills that I bring that are still underutilized in my current world. But I think there's going to be a space somewhere in the next 10 years of my life where things come together and I will be needed. The coaching skills that I've honed will be needed, as well as the diplomacy skills that I had for many, many years. And so I look forward to that. I have my hands full, as many of you know. My dad is at end of life. I think this is our last summer with him. And so when he goes, I still need to provide some support for my mom, who is well supported in our healthcare system. But um, maybe this year it'll be getting back to our roots as we did, in the Caribbean this past winter as well. So what I love about our work as coaches, right? We can be doing one thing one day and something else the next day, impacting people all over the world. And so again, I want to continue balancing personal and professional responsibilities as well, because I think as a leader in this field, there's a lot going on right now with group coaching, team coaching, coaching supervision, areas that I all have my fingers in the different pieces of the pie. And so yeah, I want to be around for a long time. And as much as my adventure loves adventure, it's a bit risky, as my father reminded me the other day. He's like, are you sure you would want to do that, Jennifer? I'm like, okay, let me think about it, Dad. I'll think about it. But no, I think this business too, we've hit 20 years. This year is really about re-envisioning what the next phase will look like. And I think there's still a lot of space for us to impact in as the world and as the industry continues to grow. So thank you for all being
Hmm.
part of this, because you are part of my legacy as well. And Rosalind, I'm glad that you're loving your Instagram posts. I'm coming back to Instagram. I've been on TikTok in this last 3 months, and I know TikTok is not going to be available to so many people in another few months. So I'm really
Hmm.
sitting on the fence. What is the next Instagram brand? So if you're on Instagram, check out Coaching Biz Builder, which is all about coaching business builder. There's also Plan, Do, Track and Reconnecting Workspaces, along with my personal feed on Instagram. So depending on if you want to look at productivity, which is Plan, Do, Track, coaching business development, coaching biz builder, or Reconnecting Workspaces, which is all about, helping teams and groups reconnect in a workspace. We are, and I think it's safe to say, Ivana, myself, and Michelle Mullins, who's my former podcast co-host, we're going to have a new podcast coming out in the next 3 to 6 months, maybe even sooner. I won't announce the name because I haven't gotten approval from my partners, Ivana and Michelle, but I think it's going to be a fun, creative process. And I know that people aren't liking to read as much as they used to. And, our Remote Pathways podcast that Michelle and I co-hosted was a great vehicle during the pandemic, but we put it on hiatus about 2 years ago. And I'd like to get my voice back out there around coaching. So this next
Hmm.
podcast is going to be coaching related. So with that,
Amazing.
Ivana, I think you're going to bring this plane home. It is
I
almost that
am.
time.
I
So
am. And I want to just I'm being sensitive to not ask stacked questions, but I think there is something to be, you said so much in that last sound bite, about that re-envisioning. That's really what I kind of anchored on. And so I would love for us to bring this conversation to a talk later on like what is the re-envisioning of the industry, because even coaching right now is very in much a transition, a change. And so as we speak of revisioning, what wisdom can you impart with what you've been through, what you've seen, evolved, been part of, brought forward in the last 20 years that you can impart on us in terms of the industry, the volatility, the revisioning, even for us as entrepreneurs as we bring this work forward. What are your
yeah.
thoughts on that and what leave us with that?
Oh wow, this is a good question. This is a hard one because there's a couple of things. One, like I'm going to go back to embrace the chaos, right? Change is not slowing down. And I've really been amazed at the chord that my coaching teams through chaos, TED Talk, has had in the last 18 months. Over 31,000 people have watched it. And to me, again, going back to even last week with this team, like teams, organizations, communities, families, we all want to have a space to connect. We all want to have a space to dream a little and, think about what is possible. And that's what we do as coaches. And so while coaching as we know it today, it will continue to morph and change. And what I always take solace in is like coaching is coaching is coaching. When I started as a coach, it was the same models that we're using today. The vehicles are changing, the way we coach is changing. But in our work, especially as group and team coaches, it's about bringing it back to the fundamentals. It's about distilling it down to the core, as I said, in effective group coaching. And so how do we continue to lead from that? You know, vision wise, it's interesting. I think, going back to the story I shared at the front of this conversation, I think back to that conversation I had with Lillian DeVries in downtown Toronto when I was still a leader with the UN, saying 20 years from now, I hope that Potentials Realized will be an award-winning company that will have impacted thousands of people. We've done that. In 2020, January, actually December 31st, 2019, I set into the ground that I wanted to add on to the water drop, the lighthouse, right? And I have it here beside me every day. I live at a lighthouse, like it is down the road. I drive past it every day. And I'm getting a little lighthouse for the cottage to put on our point, because to me, it represents, a space of connection, of community, of safety, of being a beacon in a world that sometimes can radically change in dramatic ways that we can never foresee. And so in December 2019, I put a stake in the ground and I said, I really hope that this is the decade where we as an organization can impact the work of 5 million people. And I knew in 2019 that it was not going to just be with coaches. It was going to be, and I said it then, remote organizations and leaders. I had no idea what was around the corner a few months later. And looking at our numbers of people that we have impacted in the remote space, organizations, professionals that are now hybrid and who are still struggling, I think we will hit 5 million by the end of this decade. We are only in 2024 April, and we continue to have amazing conversations. So part of what I am hopeful for is that, like we have been as an organization, part of this is about creating a movement of conversation and being there as a spark in so many different ways. So I want to thank all of you who are still here listening. You are part of this community, you are part of this movement as well in affecting change from within and without and outside of systems, whether it's organizations, whether it's communities, whether it's families. All of us all over the world have a vision of what is possible. And that's what we do every day, help people connect with their vision and what's possible in the world.
Thank you so much, Jen. Really appreciate you imparting your wisdom, your raw and true experiences, and really, I think, just demonstrating the embodiment of being true to yourself in the evolution of your work and what's coming forward for all of us. So I'm just going to read Gina's comment, and Gina says, I have to run. Thank you. And congratulations on 20 years. Thank you so much, Gina. And on that note, really want to thank all of you for joining us today. We do hope to see you in upcoming community calls, and really wonderful contribution by everyone. And Jen, thank you for your contribution. And I look forward to continuing to play with you in many ways, and fulfilling our mutual vision of supporting the ripple effect. So
well,
thank you
thank
so
you,
much.
Ivana, for hosting. Again, like Potentials Realized is not just me. We have amazing folks as well. And yeah, come on back. Hope to join us next week. Next week, we'll be back to our usual format of a bit more hands-on work. So if you want to really think about you and your amplification as a coach and business owner, we will see you at 12 noon on August, I was going to say April.
April.
April 29th, I think the date is, if I dare say. I might have that off by a day or so.
I think it's the 30th. It's the Tuesday, right? It's the
April 30th.
Tuesday,
There's
the
my strategic thing. And it
30th.
is always this link.
Yeah.
So yeah, save this link. It is the same link every week. Just note that we don't allow bots in the room. There's like a lot of people who send their otter AI. Don't allow that in the room. So please come physically and virtually, and we'll see you soon. All right, everyone. Take care. Be well.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Ivana. Bye.